Welcome to Common Mansplaining. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Eddie and Christian here. Christian, how's it going?
Outstanding.
Sweet. We got a fun one for you today. We are going to talk all about one of my favorite journalists, not Don Lemon. Lemon, man, I got to say, this guy is, as journalists go, he's basically scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, like, misogynist charges, got dropped from like one of the lowest quality journalist sites in the world already, and then he couldn't even cut that. So but one thing that we'll talk about today is that really anybody can be a journalist, and that's if nothing else, Don Lemon kind of proves that. So as most of you know, Don Lemon and a bunch of other protesters were recently in St. Paul and charged into City's Church as part of a protest to confront the pastor there, who was perceived to be, I believe he is actually a member of ICE, right? So they thought he was like a
works for like customs enforcement, right?
Right, works for customs enforcement
in some capacity, yeah.
And moonlights for them. He's not even like really like a direct like full time or all the time, but anyway. So he also is a pastor, and so they decided to just storm the church and hold up worship for basically an entire service. And now Don Lemon claims to have a separate role in this. He claims to only have been present
before that, they were asked to leave. Yes. They did not leave. Don Lemon didn't stay for the full time, but then subsequently after the fact, they were arrested. A grand jury charged them with misdemeanor and a felony. So that's just there. All right. So what does Don Lemon say?
Well, right. So like just so that everybody knows, they're being charged with, but the FACE Act, right? And so the FACE Act is basically this law that was designed to do two things. One was to prohibit people from barring access to clinics, to abortion clinics, and the other is to prohibit people from barring access to places of worship, basically. But there's some specific language in there, and we're going to talk about it today. But yeah, so obviously Don Lemon is trying to play the angle, although all of them have pled not guilty. Don Lemon is using the special angle of, I was not there as an activist, I was not there as a protester, I was there as a journalist only to document this event rather than to be involved in the actual event, which of course was illegal, right?
And he claims he's being silenced. And
yes, indeed. He claims that this is an affront to the First Amendment, and it is indeed an affront to the First Amendment, just not the way that he thinks. So we're going to talk about that too. So the first thing I want to say about this is that being a journalist in America isn't like a special card that you get. It's not like this special membership. Now, don't get me wrong, you can get credentialed as a journalist. You can get press credentials, but anyone can be a journalist, right? I can walk down to the corner store, hold my phone out, and get all of the same protections that any member of press gets, period. Because I have in the Constitution and the First Amendment the right to the freedom of press. I can provide that press. Now, I don't have to, right? I can do what I want, right? I can fulfill all of my rights the way I deem appropriate.
And if you were to walk down to the corner and publish this to YouTube and reporting, they could choose to not publish it. Right. Type of thing like that. But the government cannot punish you. Right. They can attack your speech or remove your speech. Yeah, YouTube or the private or somebody could say, right, you're on a public street, you're reporting something, government's powerless to do anything about that.
Correct. So and so as a consequence, one of the first things that strikes me about this whole scenario is that Don Lemon seems to be trying to play like both sides of the fence here, right? He seems to be trying to be like able to perform the protest with them, but then as his needs require, he kind of like stops and puts on this press hat so that he's hiding behind this press shield. The problem is that's not how it works, right? The way it works is either every protester in this group is protected in their right to be somewhere and to document, or none of them are. right? And I don't think people really respect that, right? The people are treating like Don Lemon and I guess Georgia Fort, who is also there, who is also a journalist. They're claiming that these people are separate from the pack. Now, they may be separate from the pack in their actions on the site, but they're not separate from the pack in their rights as humans in America. They're not. Everybody's got the same number of rights, the same type of rights, right? And that's part of the concept of Americanism in general, is that we're all equal under the law. You don't get to have like some special group who has special privileges just because you happen to be reporting the news, right? Now, you may have to adhere to some special like infringements because of like the things that you choose to do, but anyway, so that's the first thing that strikes me. What is your first impression
Well, my thing is that Don Lemon and most people, even my friends on the left, my sister-in-law is a degree in journalism from Columbia, would not call Don Lemon a journalist, right? He's what they call a talking head, right?
Okay.
Or news reader. Like he's photogenic, he's got a pleasant voice, looks good. So this is somebody who would be on TV reading the news while people out in the field are doing real reporting, right? So, right, the Peter Jennings scenario, Peter Jennings never graduated high school, didn't have any educational bona fides, but he had a great TV presence and was a phenomenal news reader and sort of an anchor. Right? Yeah, like us. Yeah, like us. Yes. His charisma score was very high. So Don Lemon thinks his charisma score is higher than it is, shall we say. And CNN, he worked for CNN for a long time, finally got fed up with that. He's clearly biased, but his reporting was contradicted as false so many times he was gainfully unemployed there. So now he's doing something on his own. Now here's so being a talking head, or he's moved into, now he's a commentator. So he definitely, like us, has a podcast and gives his opinions on the news. He's not right. But this was a way for him to sort of show that he was out there actually collecting things. But this was something he set up. He was planning. He was giving food to the coffee to the protesters. He fully knew and was in that. And so this was definitely something he was supportive of. Right? He was pushing this agenda. So this was advocacy. Now, advocacy and even biased journalists who are biased for one side of the left, I would say pretty clearly Don Lemon is biased for the left, are still protected by the right.
Yeah, perfectly
John
allowed.
and the other people biased for the right, still protected. So your biases don't matter as far as that goes.
Right.
But one thing, right, and if they were doing their protest on the street or against the government or in a public place or online on his podcast, nobody would do, but they deliberately were trying to be edgy with this. Right?
Yes.
And so they could have stood out there and engaged them as their service ended when people came out.
Right.
They didn't. They went inside and they wanted cameras to document it, that they were actively disrupting worship, right? To confront, and were asked to leave.
Yep.
Right? So all of these things, they might seem like small things, but to the common man, this context is important. Context matters. Right? When we're thinking of our rights matter in context, because we can't, just like we can't take another man's labor or deprive another man of his property.
Yes.
Something like that. Coming on and infringing another person's worship, right? When you're not invited to it in a way, is definitely something that is protected. And this FACE Act stipulates it even further, creates penalties for it. Now, I think the stipulations in there for religious worship were added as a compromise when they were writing this up to protect abortion. And so it's never been tried before. Nobody's ever tried anyone, because people, frankly, have the common sense to not disrupt worship services usually, unless you're some crazy person who's committed a felony anyways. And so then they just charge them with that over hate crime or whatever.
Right.
So So this type of thing was a unique situation. So it hadn't really been done and tested. The first magistrate it went through, who was a liberal, wouldn't press the charges, but they went to a grand jury. The grand jury did it. They say the people on the right or in the Department of Justice who are prosecuting it are sort of inexperienced judges or inexperienced prosecutors. They think it's most likely that it will be dismissed because they don't see for a variety of reasons right now. We'll go through those in a second. But essentially they want to test, at least have hearings and say, we've never had a case to test these protections against religious services. We've only had cases protecting entrances to medical clinics or abortion providers, right? So let's have some hearings, hear some arguments on that, and not just have it be dismissed. Oh yeah, we're not going to let that apply. So potentially, if this is really a First Amendment issue, the Supreme Court should rule this whole law unconstitutional.
Perhaps, right?
But we need to have hearings. We need to really get to that. That's, I think, another core thing that will apply to the common man, to regular people. This isn't just an issue about elites, but something that can affect us, and we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like you said. I mean, by the way, if you guys want to protest, right, please protest. Go ahead, protest. It's your right to protest. You have the right to assemble peacefully. You have the right to assemble peacefully, right? You have the right to assemble on public property where you're not blocking like day-to-day business, right? Where you're not infringing anyone else. This is the way, by the way, this is the way all the rights in America work. You have the right to X unless exercising the right to X takes away the right to something else from somebody else, right? Yep. Like, for example, I have the right to free speech, right? But I can't use my speech, for example, to slander someone or to libel someone, because to do that is to take away rights of the pursuit of property away from them, right? I have the right to life, right? I have the right to liberty, for example. I have the right to move my body and do with my body as I deem fit. But I should not have the right, for example, to terminate a life inside me, because that's not my life. That's infringing on somebody else's life, right? And so that's how all of our rights work. We have the right to anything that's listed in the Constitution, so long as it doesn't infringe upon somebody else's right to do something. Now, Don Lemon has the right to both protest and to document, to freedom of press. But he can't
print up all of his ideas, distribute them. Yeah,
absolutely. But he can't use either of those to infringe on someone else's right to worship. He can't use either of those to infringe on somebody else's private property rights. He can't use either of those to disrupt other people's stuff. And he's trying to get away with it by, and you know what, it bugs me. Like, he wouldn't be able to do this regardless of the circumstances, but it bugs me that he's like trying to put on this like, "Ooh, I'm a journalist" hat, and like, because I'm a journalist, I can, like, can you imagine if I like busted up in your house and be like, "But I'm here to just report. I'm just here to report. I got my journalist hat on. I got my card. I'm reporting that I'm trespassing on your property." What?
Yeah. I mean, if you and I came into Don Lemon's house uninvited,
right,
with on a live stream, reporting to what's going on inside Don Lemon's house, even if it was objectionable, right? We don't, and he asks us to leave, and we don't leave, we're going to be in trouble. That's kind of obvious.
We can't feel like, no, we're common mansplaining. I don't think you understand. We're official reporters of independent news. Like, no, absolutely not. And so, all right.
One more point, just really quick. The Supreme Court over the years has been very liberal in their definition of what is speech. Interpretive dance is speech, all kinds of stuff. Like that, we're giving you a really long leash on speech. But I can go and say, put duct tape over your mouth.
Right.
That's my speech. As an expression, I'm putting duct tape against for somebody who doesn't want me to put duct tape on them. I can't silence or infringe on your right to speech just because this is my art project. I'm like, oh no, I'm doing this as an artist. This is protected art. Me putting duct tape over Eddie's mouth. No, right?
Absolutely.
No, and so there's the context matters. I do a painting. I take a picture of Eddie and I put duct tape over him, put that on a flyer, hand it out. Yeah, all day. But I go and actually try to stop him from talking. I'm the one in the wrong, not him. No matter if I'm doing it for journalism or this is part of my religion or any of those First Amendment rights, it's not going to swim.
Right. So, yeah, with that in mind, like understanding that's how rights work in America. Just one right doesn't allow you to infringe on somebody else's rights. We're going to talk about this now. Just because I say all these things and preface all this with that doesn't mean that I think necessarily that Don Lemon is officially guilty under the FACE Act. I don't know, honestly. And just to throw that out ahead of time. One, because as like Christian mentioned, this is the first time it's being used for this part of it, just so that you guys are aware. And I highly recommend you look up the law itself, right? Rather than taking any kind of legal advice from either Christian or I. We're not lawyers, but look up the law. And, it's funny, when I originally started looking at this, I didn't even know it could be used for places of worship. I thought it was just, because it's the name of the thing is like freedom. What is it? Freedom of access to clinic freedom of access to clinic areas. Right. So it's
entrances
doesn't mention anything about worship. Right. But if you go into the law and you look at, subsection 2, it says, yes, no, this is absolutely about people who would be obstructing or intimidating or threatening or anything like that to prohibit any sort of form of worship. So, yeah, this does actually kind of fit the bill. Now, that being said, it's a complicated situation. And one of the things that we have to remember is that, when it comes to, somebody asking you to leave, right? Let's say they've asked you to leave their property and, you can say yes and kind of dilly-dally. And there's no real way that a court's like there's nobody keeping a stopwatch and saying, okay, you have exactly 1 minute and 18 seconds to get off the property. And if you don't, you're in violation. And if you do, you know what I mean? There's no magical cutoff line with that. And so one of the games I'm sure Don Lemon's going to play is say, well, I was only there for about 7 minutes after being asked to leave, right? So I had to pack up my equipment. I had to, wrap up the stuff that we were doing and da-da-da-da-da. Otherwise, there's going to be some games, I'm sure, played by both sides of this equation, right? And understand from the backdrop of this, the whole thing is a game, right? I want you to realize that no matter what happens here, the left is playing a game of narrative control over Minnesota, trying to show that ICE is deadly and mean and evil. And, they're going to show all of the bad ICE incidents in your face in media over and over again. And the right is going to play a game similarly to the other direction. They're going to say, oh, no, these are the protesters being unreasonable and violating laws and that, ICE is justified. That's going to be a game, right? We all know this. And so, you can ask the question, well, why are we focused on this as opposed to some of the other things that you may or may not think are more important? All of this stuff is important. And how what you focus on is going to be a very difficult game for each of us to play while we're looking at it. So.
Well, yeah, when Eddie and I were discussing this topic, really, we like to have our topics applied to the common man, right? Not just to elites. And we all go to church, millions of Americans go to church. Yeah. And if this is just dismissed out of hand and people feel like, hey, we can do political protests at churches, then they're, and we can not even just stand on the sidewalk and wave our signs, but go in and disrupt them while they're worshiping. This unlocks a whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
Right? Whole new can of worms, which, right, they can be, hey, this church has these type of beliefs, or we know this church has a very high percentage of people of this political party, and they'll go and
People don't realize it's one of those things where it's really easy to root for. We were talking about this too, Christian and I. It's really easy to root for your own team in this kind of thing, right? It's really easy to be like, oh, well, Don Lemon's on the left, so he's got to be the bad guy. Christians, we're kind of Christians, so we're on the right, we're conservative. The Christians got to be the good guy. So, but the problem is, you don't realize how quickly this can turn against you. Can you imagine? Just for those of you out there who are liberal, just put your, wearing somebody else's shoes for just a moment, imagine it on the other foot and imagine what it would be like if a racist was like, you know what, I'm going to bring a camera. I'm going to go into a historically black church and just disrupt worship all day long. Just disrupt worship. Can't stop me. I'm a journalist, right? Imagine somebody
I'm
trying to
reporting on what a black congregation says when I come in and say offensive racial slurs. Oh,
right.
I'm just documenting it.
Yeah, I'm just documenting. And see, that's the thing, right? Like maybe, I guess I realize that seems like a ridiculous application. It does seem ridiculous. But the problem is, so does Don Lemon marching up in his church. That seems ridiculous to me. Like, I would hope that anybody out there, even people who really love Don Lemon, and God help you if you really love Don Lemon, but even those who really love Don Lemon, I would hope that at least you could admit to yourself that this was at best just really horrible judgment, right? Like one of the things that's going on here is that Don Lemon knew about this event in the beginning. He knew about it beforehand. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the only documenter there, right? Other people would have been right outside waiting to document for this, right? Somehow, magically, he's the only person with this insider information with this activist group, and he goes to this zone. And so, like, you would think that if nothing else, Don Lemon would at least say to them, by the way, I'm going to be there as an impartial witness of just a documenter. Y'all shouldn't go into church. Like just at the minimum, like I'm going to be standing right out here because I'm not going to trespass. You guys do what you want. I can't keep you from breaking the law, but I highly recommend against it. And if you want my Starbucks, it's going to be sitting right out here on the steps. Like I don't understand why he didn't do that. I don't understand as it to just a modicum of responsibility, even if he was going.
Well, it's spicier to report on people breaking laws.
Sure.
Frankly, right?
Sure.
That if they had obeyed laws, right? And this is part of the thing with protests and with almost no attention is bad attention, and that's why the narrative control, attention, eyeballs, people talking about Don Lemon. Everybody wanted to forget that Don Lemon exists, and him making himself a martyr for the left. Now, I don't know if he thought he would be arrested. He definitely, I think, expected in Minnesota being with judges and the prosecutors being so favorable to people on the left,
Right.
he would see prosecutorial discretion in his favor. But with the feds there, with the scrutiny on that, they decided, hey, all right, let's not give him a pass. So, yes, whether he had criminal intent, right, he's probably just, I don't want to say stupid, but he probably he's not the smartest guy, he's not the sharpest guy in the tech. He probably just didn't use wise judgment. It's probably not quite criminal, but I still want the hearings about whether we're protected, whether people that break into churches to protest are going to face any penalties, or if it's just please disperse.
Yeah. I agree. Now, one thing that's interesting to note about, and I don't want to turn this into like a legal analysis because I'm not a lawyer and it gets kind of dry. But one thing I should mention about the FACE Act law that I've noticed, and even something I noticed about some of the other laws in Minnesota, that statutes that kind of cover this situation that are like misdemeanor laws and stuff like that. One of the weird things is that they all seem to say stuff like, you can't block the entrance, but they don't seem to have any mention of like blocking stuff inside the church, right? Because they don't think anybody's really dumb enough to, like, nobody had the foresight to see that someone was actually going to march in a clinic, in a church, right? Like they're thinking these guys might protest, they might block the entrance to the clinic, like if they're really radical. Like nobody's thinking they're going to like march in and like seal off a hallway, right? Like no one, because what happened in the church is they didn't block the entrances. They marched right on in the church and like blocked off the altar. They blocked off any place where someone could walk up to get communion. They blocked off any access to the priest. And I'm like, that's still obstruction, but in the language of the actual law, it's absent, it's missing. So he might get off on a technicality there, right? Like it might just be the fact that the law is poorly written, and as so many laws are, right? And so I'm looking at this, and then I'm like, well, something's got to cover this, right? Like I'm like typing in Chat GPT. I'm like, wait, so do we have, what about, do we have any protections? It's like, what about, just infringement on the First Amendment? He's like, well, he's not a government agent, right? Like the First Amendment protects you against government agencies infringing on your rights, not against private citizens. Those are supposed to be caught by other laws like this. And so it's like, okay, well, what protections are there? And it's like, well, there's a statute in Minnesota, and I went to that one, and it has the same language. It's like blocking entrances and exits. And I'm like, oh gosh. So like
so let me get this straight. You go into a Planned Parenthood, but you bypass the exit. And so you, as a journalist, start interviewing women, having pelvic exams, and saying, how would you feel if your baby was feeling pain right now, or something like that, right? Very provocative questions.
Right.
And you expect nobody to drag you out under keister and charge you because you're a journalist with a camera.
Right. And right. And so like, yeah, you could like literally like block off corridors and say like, well, yeah, we gave you entrance to the clinic. You just can't get entrance to the exam room. You can't get entrance to the operation room. You can't get entrance to the, it's like, oh my gosh. And so that's the kind of stupid stuff that happens in the law all the time, which I'd love to shore up, which it's good that we're testing it now. Right. Like, now that being said, another spoiler alert, I don't think that the FACE Act is actually constitutional. Probably just because it's again not specific enough. I think there needs to be like very, very well-defined, because one of the things that they've done with the FACE Act, for those of you who have followed this at all, is Obama and Biden used the FACE Act to prosecute Catholics who were standing out front outside the abortion clinics. And I should note, like for comparison, they weren't even blocking off entrances. They weren't even inside the thing. They were standing near the entrance. Right. They were not obstructing anything. Now, they might have been intimidating. I don't know. That part's really subjective, right? Like in one of the things, the language is like, did they intimidate you? They might have said something intimidating. I have no idea, right? But I will say that like they weren't blocking off the entrances. They were like just near the entrance. And if you compare that to people who actually walk all the way into the church and stop worship for 45 minutes, who are like chanting and screaming over the priest so that he can't have a homily, so that he can't read from the gospel. Like, I don't think it gets any more clear that you're obstructing the worship. But because of these, but one of the things that I noted about the FACE Act is that, like, we do have a right to protest, right? And so the laws should be clear. It should be like, listen, you are legally allowed to be within 15 feet of the entrance or something like that, so that it's blatant, like, so that you can be like, all right, we still have the right to protest. This is where we can protest, right? But to have this kind of nebulous language where it's like subjectively up to the prosecutors whether or not they think you're being too close to be intimidating, that's not okay with me. Yeah. Right? And it was obviously used badly.
And there's a long precedent, right, of trying to protect free speech, even when it makes us roll our eyes, right? And common sense, like hiring a prostitute for sex, but you film it and post it as a porn film. Now it's protected speech, right? And so and that washes too, right? So it's like when people there's technicalities in the law, and even though we as common people roll our eyes at them, we do have to respect those, because those protect us, right? When the government comes after us, we can use those technicalities to protect us.
Right.
So that's very important, right? That the government has to abide by the laws and that. But I do so this is important to just check on the government's power. Maybe the FACE Act is overreach, and the people we need to be more free with speech. And maybe we need a new law specifically to have penalties for those that disrupt religious worship. Because if there's not, I feel like people are going to be teeing off. Like, my church is very big about not talking about politics at church or during the service at all. I'm not. That's not. Other churches have different lines as far as that goes, but nobody talks politics, certainly over the pulpit.
Right.
in a official way.
Sure.
But there are positions the church has publicly made on positions that are political, related to family, related to LGBTQ rights and various things like that. And somebody who disagrees with the positions the churches has taken can and do protest. There are protests in Salt Lake City outside church headquarters all the time. People with signs protesting, offering passing out pamphlets to people. Right? It's been going on for years. Right? Free to do it, and it's not going away. But if people feel like now emboldened that they can now go inside and disrupt worship services, right? Then
Now,
we're gonna have chaos, and we're gonna so I think we do need some clear protections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what would make the FACE Act much better is if they just had just extremely specific, like this is how far away you can be while still exercising your right to freedom of speech, this kind of thing. Now, this is a great question by Leah Hayes. She said, what about when ICE comes into a church? Right. So using the same principle that I mentioned, I don't know if you were here earlier in the thing, but using the exact same principle that I mentioned at the beginning, we have these rights so long as they don't infringe upon other rights, right? And so the same thing goes in reverse. If you're a criminal, you can't use your right to freedom of worship to protect yourself from your criminal behavior. And if others still have it, now the cops still have to have all the things that they would normally have to enter private property. They have to have probable cause and stuff like that. But if they have those things, if they have probable cause, if, for example, they happen to know that you're a member of the congregation and you hurt somebody and you're also an illegal immigrant and blah, 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 blah. And then they have the right to go into the church, and that right of freedom of worship doesn't protect you from being like, you can't just be a criminal and then be like, haha, I'm worshiping, so I'm safe. Right. And you can't, likewise, you can't be, a criminal and be like, haha, I'm a journalist, I'm safe.
Well, hey, I'm going to rob a bank, but you can't come after me because I actually documented it with a phone the whole time. It was just journalism. I was just there. I knew the bank robbery was happening. Sure, I told people to get on the ground and walked out with bags of cash, but I documented it. It's online. That was protected speech,
And then I went to confession, so it's like doubly protected, like completely, like every aspect. No, yeah. So yeah, that doesn't mean that ICE should just be barging into places for no reason, right? They should never do that, right?
But government definitely cannot impede worship.
Yes,
they're on real thin ice.
Right. Yeah. The government, there's actually more protections against the government doing that than someone like Don Lemon in a field full of protesters. Right. But that being said, yeah. So obviously, Don Lemon wants to paint this as an assault on the First Amendment. But I think it's kind of rich that he ignores the fact that he is literally assaulting the First Amendment as he's doing this. Right. Like, that's kind of rich to me. I mean, like, you would think somebody like that would, I mean, I guess he really isn't the brightest dude on earth, but like, how does he not see that?
All right. Are you ready for some of the counter arguments? I'm interested in how you would respond to them. So this one's sort of a little subtle. They say criminal prosecution is powerful and disproportionate tool in cases best handled. Maybe there should be a civil litigation, or there should be professional discipline or public accountability, and maybe it doesn't rise to the level of criminal prosecution. Is there a way for us to handle this that doesn't rise to criminal, or because of the precedent that people could feel emboldened to disrupt worships all over the country, do we need to have a precedent set so that it's clear, or is this something that could be solved through civil or other ways? What do you think on that?
This is a good question. I mean, and I could see it going either way. Ultimately, this is jurisprudential, right? This is like, what kind of tone do we want to set? Do we want to like really stop this kind of thing? Now, this kind of thing, I think it's both important that we test the FACE Act, to see if it's constitutional, but also to see if it really can be used for this use, because it's never been used for this side of the thing before. But I also think it's important if Homan is in this posture where he's trying to like calm things down, like back off a little bit, if that's the game, then maybe it would have been gentler, to like say, listen, we're going to just write you guys all a fine for trespassing. We're going to write, or for disorderly conduct, or any number of, like, they actually broke like 17 different statutes. People don't realize it. Like, but like that, yeah, we went with the felony, but there's like, boom, 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 boom. But there's so many stupid, like, noise ordinances and this, that, and it. Like, you could go down the line, and they broke a lot of stuff. But yeah, I'd be kind of happy with either. Like, I wouldn't bother me as long as there's some repercussions. I think that no matter which one they use now, by the way, Don Lemon is still going to do his song and dance and cry about his speech being
He's
chilled.
a martyr. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be the
hero of free speech. Yeah. You should see. Yeah. I was on his YouTube channel where he posted a thing about after he appeared in court and pled not guilty, and he's trying to lionize himself and put him up there with the greats that fought against injustice. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, like you're John Adams or something. All right, here's question. Or
next challenge.
Okay, the next challenge. Free speech principles that protect even unpopular or reckless expression.
Yep.
Lack of clear criminal behavior that meets the threshold for prosecution. Protection of journalistic independence from state coercion. Proportionality and due process ensure punishment fits the nature of the alleged wrong. Guarding democracy from political use of power. So, again, right, is this, again, for the common man, the government coming at you and charging you with a felony can wreck your life. Just,
oh yeah,
if you don't have a ton of money now you have to defend yourself, get a lawyer, defend yourself, can be disruptive to work, to other things. Yeah. Is definitely a bullying type of behavior. Right now, an elite like Don Lemon should have the means to meet those things.
Yeah, he's fine.
but it's sort of saying it was stupid, but if it wasn't really criminal, should the state is this coercive of the state to come down so hard on it? Should they have used another punishment? I guess you sort of talked about that. Not like fines.
So I think that well, just to be clear, this was clearly criminal, right? Just so I'm clear, this was clearly criminal. Now the question isn't whether or not it was clearly criminal, but whether or not it's worthy of these punishments. I guess. I mean, that's kind of another game. I will say that the other protesters, like, who are not Don Lemon, you're right, do not maybe have the resources to recover from that kind of thing. And I wish, but part of this
they
game,
didn't have physical violence. They could point to, they weren't physically violent to the people. It was disruption. You think they were?
So, here's the thing. Now, there's definitely some evidence and some witness testimony that indicates
it's hostility violence. Now, the definition of violence, something the left has been. Speech is violence, has been trying to expand the definition of violence. So with that in mind, what would you say violence occurred in this protest?
So again, I'm going to need to see more evidence before I would believe it, before I would actually accept that this occurred. But if the claims are correct, right? I've heard from witnesses and from, Pam Bondi, who is a dubious witness at best, but from other people, they claim to have video evidence that people like, in fact, Don Lemon himself actually obstructed the exit, keeping people from leaving at some point, like wanting to keep people in so that he can interview them and stuff like that. Now, that's kidnapping. Like, that's textbook kidnapping. Not that we would recognize it as such, because it's not like, you're, duct taping somebody and throwing them over your shoulder and carting them off. But you cannot keep people in. You cannot keep people from moving around freely. So that I would classify as violent. Now, that being said, I don't think that was the aim, right? I don't think that was the goal. I just think it may have kind of inadvertently happened. I'm hoping it didn't happen, actually, is what I'm hoping. But yeah, go on. What was the next one?
Oh, well, it was saying that I think well, it was just sort of public interest. Journalists serve the public by challenging institutions and disseminating information, even uncomfortable or contentious information. This societal role requires independence from state interference, saying churches are important institutions, and if somebody isn't, questioning the church's institutional power, then who else? This is a public interest sort of thing. What would you say to that?
So yeah, like had Don Lemon stayed on the steps, had he stayed outside and documented this thing, where he was not asked to leave, where he was not violating like trespassing laws, or even if it was like he was there against somebody's will, but like nobody knew, like kind of like a Project Veritas thing, where he had like a hidden cam and stuff like that, kind of documenting the corruption quietly, but not disrupting worship of any sort, not actually infringing upon somebody else's rights. Then I would say, he's well within his right to do that. But yeah, the moment he goes from, just documenting to documenting plus infringing on someone else's rights, that's when he crosses the line. That's where he's out of, he's in deep water.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting, especially I think because he was asked to leave.
Right.
It's sort of like if they had instead of asked him, they'd engaged in debate and started having this discussion, things like that. Well, okay, these people welcome this. This is a conversation they want to have. But they were said, no, right? This is disruptive to our service. Please leave. Right. I think that context matters there as well.
Yeah.
All right, here's the other one. And the potential for political or ideological motivations. They say, given Lemon's prominence, and he's a polarizing profile, any prosecution could appear politically motivated, eroding public trust and impartial justice. Sure. So, anything that Trump does, the narrative that it's political motivation, and he's frankly earned this. He has had politically motivated, wanting to go after people that for retribution then came after him. So he can come from a high tower and say, no, how dare you question my that this is politically motivated. So the fact that anytime a prosecution is done for political motivations, we as a people, even if it's right or left, should be skeptical of that. And
I agree.
We should. That's a really high standard. Like, we don't want the government, political parties using law enforcement, and prosecutions for political ends.
Yes.
Agreed. Yeah. So you feel like that's a strong argument, or what would your contention be like that?
Again, with prosecutorial judgment, I think that's a great point. And to kind of answer None Your Business's point, right? It's like, Trump has already earned the name as a dictator, whether he is one or not. And you should know that on this channel, like neither Christian or I are like Trump apologists, right? Neither of us are like here to carry water for him. But that being said, I would point out that it's just as dangerous to allow people to trample an administration as it is for the administration to trample rights, right? Like you can get both have their own unique dangers. Now, I would claim the government trampling the rights of the commoner is more dangerous on average. But
I agree.
But that being said, like Minnesota is a dangerous display of the commoners trying to rise up against the government unlawfully, and they're showing over and over and over this resistance that really oughtn't be there to lawful action. And so there's a game that needs to be played there too, because the government can't just let that slide, right? The government has to respond to an unlawful resistance to lawful action, right? And so one of the troubles with this particular incident is, while in the abstract, in a blank slate, should anybody be going after Don Lemon? No, it'd be so much easier if we just wrote everybody here a ticket and sent them on their way. But the problem is, this is like the 750th resistance piece to ICE doing their normal job in Minnesota. And so all of a sudden it's like, it's getting to the point where we now have to set precedents, where we have to make an example out of people who are trying to do this stupid resistance. You cannot trample. You can't go into hotels and trash the place just because you think ICE might be there. You can't set up blockades and start checking people's IDs because you think ICE might be there. You can't march into a church because you think the pastor might be ICE. I'm sorry. these are things that you cannot do. And maybe the one you get away with, right? Maybe the one we just like sweep it all under the rug, use some jurisprudence and say, you're right. Let's not come down on them, because government coming down on somebody too hard is a bad thing. But after like the 50th or 60th or 20th or 170th time, after like attacking people with vehicles and Molotov cocktails and bricks and stuff like that, there's a point where a government has to make a statement.
It's true. This protest did not happen in a vacuum, and it's interesting. I've tried to get people's opinions on this for a couple weeks, and I would post on that. And what do you think about the Minnesota church protest, the Don Lemon church protest?
Right.
They wouldn't talk about it all. They'd talk about the shootings, and ICE is shooting people in the street, and like, you're defending ICE, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not defending people being shot in the street. I'm never doing that. I'm asking about the church protest. What are your feelings on that? Is that appropriate next step? Right, because that's an escalation. That's essentially saying we need to take this up a notch. That's what they were trying to do. So, like, it's not just enough for us to harass ICE when they're doing their jobs. We have to harass them when they're. That's why they want to dox them. When they're at home, when they're worshiping, when they're trying to live their life.
And even harass people that might be ICE. That's loco. Like, by the way, for anybody out there who was thinking about doing that, if you're getting to the point where you're so like, your mind is so warped that you are so like beat out of shape, you have so much of a derangement syndrome about something that you like are starting to harass people because they might be that thing.
There's a rumor, it's like when they send frat boy buddies send SWAT teams to their buddies' houses as a practical joke. You just started spreading a rumor that such and such works for ICE, and all of a sudden, the protesters are, throwing bricks through their window.
Like, that's, people don't realize how, like, if anything is like a fascist type of action, that's the kind of thing that Nazi Germany used to do. They used to go harass people who might be Jewish, harass people that might have Jewish friends, like that kind of rumor mill action. That's insane. That is like out there. So yeah, I mean, at some point the government has to kind of.
They're trying to tamp things down, and it's like, look, we don't want this escalation. You protest ICE when they're wearing uniforms and doing their jobs. That's one thing. You protest. You want to dox them so you can go to their private homes, their private places of worship. We're gonna try to protect that. So that I respect. I do think, again, First Amendment protections are so strong in this country, and deservedly should be. And here's the one thing I do want to remember, because again, this is not in a vacuum. Journalists were silenced who wanted to report or question orthodoxy when it came to the COVID vaccines, or whether COVID came from the lab in China, right? And the left was all too happy to restrict or silence those journalists, right? For the collective good or whatever. Now, they're claiming, that they want freedom of speech. So freedom of speech for me, not for thee. This is stuff we need to hold to. If you're for Don Lemon's right to report freedom of speech, okay, but we're going to need integrity and consistency when this turns around on you, and when right-wing people follow these same tactics against the left, or when the Democratic president is in power.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things too is that, it's, guys, for everybody out there, and if you've watched the show for a little while, you'll know that I'm a big guy on setting a principle, right? The world, this is how the world should work. And I know I'm an idealist. I know that. But the way we should work our ideological principles out is we should have these principles, and then we should put those together and then come up with a position on an item, right? Well, it shouldn't go backwards. It shouldn't, like, we start with a position and then see if they match the principles that we hope that we have, right? We should start with the principles and then apply them evenly regardless of the circumstances. So if the principle is we don't break the law, it's just that simple, right? So then if I believe in freedom of speech, unless exercising that freedom of speech breaks the law, infringes on other people's rights, if I simply just apply that principle evenly across the board, I'm safe. I'm ideologically safe. I may not be legally safe depending on what framework I'm working in, but I'm ideologically safe, right? And so people who are, trying to report on COVID, unless they're breaking the law, there should be no problem with them reporting on COVID, period. Unless they're breaking the law, because they're following my principle. They're saying they're just reporting and they're not breaking the law. They're not infringing on anybody else's rights. They're just reporting what they see. Now,
or opinions, even if they're biased opinions.
Yeah, even biased opinions, even lies.
Even lies or incorrect opinions are protected.
Unless those lies directly influence somebody's right to pursue property or something like that. Again, we have rules on that. We have laws that protect people's rights. And the same thing goes here. As long as Don Lemon isn't breaking the law, he can report on whatever he wants. He could have sat outside the church on the street for hours. He could have sat out there for days and nobody would have cared. And that's the problem, right? Nobody would have cared. And that's where we really go with this. Don Lemon wasn't there to try to do the thing that he was claiming he was doing, this impartial reporting. He was there to try to regain relevance because he's basically lost it. He's basically just not important enough or special enough, and nobody really listens to him anymore. That's the big thing, right? That's got nothing to do with all this. All this other stuff is smoke-filled coffeehouse crap. It's just Don Lemon wanted to be famous again. He wants to maintain his relevance in society, and that's all this really is.
Yeah, people that know and follow know he has no credibility in his reporting. None of his reporting will be taken seriously.
Really?
But by this through provocative action, right? That he, hoped that this would come. So I think this is following his plan. Maybe DOJ prosecutors fell into the trap.
Maybe.
But at this point, right? It wasn't in a vacuum. It was, Minnesota. Everything's heightened scrutiny.
But he went over. I think so. Here's the thing: even if he was laying a trap, he crossed the line, and the lines that he crossed were as follows. Number one, he obviously had foreknowledge of this event, right? Obviously, he even documented that he had foreknowledge of this event. No other journalist had this foreknowledge unless you were in this activist group, right? So
they didn't tell us.
He obviously knew what. Yeah, right. I wish nobody contacted me to let me know which church to be at, right? And I'm a journalist. I can wear that hat, right? And he obviously knew this was going on. He chose to go onto private property, even though he knew it was illegal. He chose to disrupt a First Amendment right, which is freedom of worship, even though he knew it was illegal. And then he was asked to leave and did not leave immediately. Now, he left 7 minutes later, but that's not immediate, right? And I think that's going to be the problem when he runs into court. He's going to run up into court, and the prosecutor's going to be like, well, why didn't you just immediately start packing up and going? When you were asked to leave, why not just leave? And then he's going to have to answer that question. Now, he may avoid the FACE Act, maybe, right? Because it's nebulous and it's poorly written. And I think maybe the FACE Act should just go away anyway. But I don't think he's going to avoid disorderly conduct. I don't think he's going to avoid trespassing. And I don't think he's going to avoid Minnesota statute 609.28 interfering with religious observance. I think he's going to be caught with all three of those. All three of those are misdemeanors.
Yeah.
But,
he'll do some community service, which will probably mean doing a George Soros protest and not getting paid for it.
By the way, that reminds me, a lot of these cats that were at this church were coming from states away. If you got 45 people and 30 of them are from another state, that should tell you at least a little something about, and that doesn't make it that part of it doesn't make it illegal or problematic, not legally speaking, right? But it should tell you how they're organized, that they're probably getting paid, because people don't just randomly take off work, drive several states away so that they can show up at a church where we don't know that where there's an impromptu protest. This is all staged. This is all staged. And again, I'm fine with that. And I do have a question for you on that line, because somebody asked me this the other day. Do you think that the Republicans, or the right, have a counterpart, a staged protest thing? Because when I heard that question, it's like, man, that's a good question. Maybe, right? I don't know about it, but maybe we do.
A time where we staged a protest that was,
or like paid people to protest, or like, organized, like everybody, like we're all going to go here and provide resist. I don't, the January 6th was kind of like
we announced. I mean, there's the right to life marches. I mean, they're all sort of declared. I mean, right, and you got permits and stuff. This one wasn't permitted or announced or anything. Normally, you want it announced so that the press can come and report it. That's why you don't normally do spontaneous protests, because then there's no press to report it, and the press reporting is important. So this, though they didn't widely say, "Hey, we're going to be protesting to this spot," they made it secret and had private invited journalists because they could
go. They didn't have to report it in advance because they already had their built-in journalist.
I don't want to cloak myself that the right has never committed wrongs, but this was deliberately a new edge that they wanted to cross that hadn't really been done before. Right? And that's why the FACE Act is being evoked, because he's being edgy. They say, all right, well, we're going to test the edges of the law and see that, right? We'll see what shakes down about it. Right? We're skeptical on both sides. We're skeptical of Don Lemon because he has no credibility, but we're skeptical of the government and its ability to have this law infringe on free speech. But we also are skeptical of private citizens disrupting worship. Right?
Yeah, like really skeptical of that. Yeah. Really skeptical of that. Like, and it's funny, because meanwhile, whether this FACE Act holds up or not, whether it does or not, we do need a law that specifically says nobody can come into a church and just shut the worship down, right? Like, that's, I don't know what we need to do to get a law like that, but we need a law like that, period. Because this is, after like asking ChatGPT, I'm like, well, what are our protections? I'm left thinking, actually, there just aren't any, really. Like, technically, I could go into any church tomorrow and start screaming at the top of my head and blocking the altar, and really nothing can be done except for them asking me to leave, at which point I could either choose to leave or not choose to leave. And if I don't leave, I'm just guilty of trespassing, which is just a fine, right? Like, that's just not okay. It's not okay that I have that much power, that I can shut down, hundreds of people's First Amendment right immediately, and the only repercussion is, that, first of all, no repercussions if I do it for a short amount of time, and only a very small repercussion if I do it for a long amount of time. Like, that's not okay. So we need something to protect us from that now. So the good news is this event, no matter what it's done, has shown us a weakness in the law to an extent, or at least shown us a place where we have to apply the FACE Act. I don't like the FACE Act. I don't like it. I think that it allows the government to use the DOJ as a weapon, even if that's not what this is, right? I still think it lets them do it. And I mean, I think Obama, and it's like we talked about the other day with the norm breaking, Obama and Biden set the tone with this, like going after Catholics who just happened to be near an entrance of a clinic. Wow. Right. And maybe so. And again, let me preface that by saying I didn't study those cases in depth. Maybe somebody said something intimidating, while they were off to the side, or maybe they like kind of crossed over the entrance occasionally or something, and that's called an obstruction. Maybe there's some technicalities there, but like the bulk of them didn't. So, wow.
Yeah. Well, can we? All right, this is, and I would say for those of you watching, is there anything else? Can we consider this for a moment outside of politics, or is the politics of the situation in Minnesota and Don Lemon's obvious political bias inextricably a part of this story? Is he being prosecuted? If he was a right wing, if this was Sean Hannity who had done this to a liberal church, right, and they were disrupting a pastor that had organized violent ICE protests, or maybe gone to Renee Good Memorial and disrupted that or something like that. Would there, can we separate politics in this? I think that's why people are so knee-jerk sort of reflexive why so many people have come out to defend Don is really they're just against Donald Trump.
Yep.
And their Don is
the other
Don
Don.
Lemon. the battle of the Dons. This will
The
come down
Don.
to Don. So anyway.
Yeah, I know. I
Maybe
agree.
he should go by Donald Lemon. Oh,
Donald
maybe
Lemon.
we'd like
I mean, just like everything else that seems to have happened in the past year, it's like everybody on the left thinks one way, regardless of the circumstances. Everybody on the right thinks another way. And meanwhile, I'm in the middle again, as I am on most things. And I'm like sitting there thinking, like, okay, well, this is obviously illegal, but the FACE Act probably isn't right either. I don't understand why more people can't objectively look at the. When I took this to my friend today, I didn't know that the FACE Act could even be used for something like this. I thought the DOJ was stretching, like to try to like sculpt it around. But then when I read it, I'm like, oh no, this is exactly what it's for. And I'm like, I guess Don's in trouble then. I don't know, but who knows? Maybe he'll get off. Maybe his little press card gets him off the chain.
Yeah, I care a little about Don Lemon, but the precedents I do care about.
Yeah, me too. I'm definitely with it. Any other questions for us before we go? We really appreciate you guys watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. If anybody wants to debate me or Christian, but I love it. I probably have more time on my hand than Christian does. I'd love it. So reach out to me, please. I'm going to put the email up here so that you guys can reach out. commonmansplaining.com. commonmansplaining@gmail.com. And feel free to reach out to me. And we'll set something up. Send me a bio and what you're interested in talking about, and I'd love it. But anyway,
even though Eddie is centrist in the current silly times and political environment that we live in, that's considered right of center. Yeah. And I'm even more right of center. So we like to hear from people who have different viewpoints, but especially we're not elites. We want to know why this matters to everyday people and people that are working and trying to pay their bills and taxes. But
that's right.
You guys stay common.
Stay common. Catch you next time on Common Mansplain.